Thank you, Austin. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Sorry about the audio. I don't know what happened. So sometimes, these things happen. Um, let me go back and introduce our last speaker. He was supposed to be the last speaker, because he's so young. I wanted to end this event with his speech. But Austin, thank you so much, for your participation, and thank you to the Youth Activists Coalition for your participation. So let me briefly tell you something about this outstanding young man. Our youth are the present and future of our country and the world. What is at stake for them? He is a junior at James Clemens High School, Madison, Alabama. He specializes in a number of political and activist interests. He has worked as National Policy Director for Students Against Voter Suppression. He is a co-founder of the Youth Activists Coalition, an organization founded by members of the ACLU, National Advocacy Institute, to give teenagers the resources they need to succeed and organize activist efforts. So that was Austin White. So before I introduce our last speaker of this wonderful event, I would like to, people who are watching, we just had a brief interruption of our streaming to Facebook and YouTube. So give me a minute. I will make it public, so that you can actually watch the rest of the event and the rest of the speech. Education not only begins at home, but continues to occur there throughout childhood. What knowledge can parents impart, and what values can they encourage to preserve a lively democracy for their children's future? How can the community help? Please welcome my mentor, political guru, and an extended family member, Ken Hines.
Hello. I'll tell you what, following that last speech is a doozy. Can you believe that this is a fellow who is not allowed to vote because he's too young? I could make some trade-offs. The speaker and the panel that have preceded me have offered excellent analyses of the attacks on liberal democracy that have become rampant. They also have identified actions critical to defending those attacks. I want to add another dimension that I believe is important. Until we affect the institution that creates and cultivates these attacks, generation after generation will face the same dire circumstances. A long-term solution depends on our ability to affect families. In my earlier life, I was a lobbyist for the Kentucky chapter of the National Education Association. During our time working with the legislature, we wore badges to identify ourselves. And during that time, during my tenure there, my first grandchild was born. When that happened, I ordered a new badge, and it didn't say Ken Hine anymore. It said Grandpa. The reason I did that was, first of all, to recognize my new personal role. But more important than that, it recognized what I think of family, how important I think that family is as an institution. My wife spent 30 years as an elementary school teacher. During that time, she spent about 5 hours a day, 181 days a year with the children. That seems like a lot, but each of those children spent about 5 times that amount of waking time with someone other than a classroom teacher. The someones who occupy all of that time usually are family. And during each of those thousands and thousands waking moments, the child is learning. Their young brains are equal opportunity sponges. They will absorb the good, the bad, and the ugly with equal aplomb. The impact of family is both immediate and long-term. The influence that I had on my children as they matured very well may hold greater sway with my grandchildren's beliefs and values than anyone outside their family. That's both the magic and the menace of families. Millions of America's children are growing up in homes where they learn values at odds with the notion of a liberal democracy. They are learning racial and gender prejudice, xenophobia, religious exclusion, and rabid nationalism. They are learning that it is more important to preserve political and economic power than to create and maintain a nation of equality. We know that is true because we watch their parents, aunts, uncles, and grandparents carrying signs and chanting slogans that say so, and because we witness every day the messages going into their homes. There is no law we can make, we should be able to make that will change that. What we really need is a seat at the table, the kitchen table. We need to make our voice heard inside the home. We can do that, but we aren't. Instead, we're allowing those who disdain democracy to denigrate and demean our message and deliver it to families through print, word of mouth, mainstream media, and social media. We absolutely must enact the new voter rights legislation. But doing so is like applying pressure to the wounds in our democracy to keep it from bleeding to death. It is necessary, but not sufficient. Long term, we must create change at the source of the problem, the generation persistence of anti-democratic, anti-government beliefs. Long term, we must learn to communicate effectively with families. If that were easy, we already would have done it. It will require persistence, pervasiveness, and persuasiveness. First, we must reach them. Families are not looking for us, so we must go to them. Newspapers, radio, television, clubs and organizations, and social media march through front doors every day. We should march in with them. We should communicate the values essential to democracy through every newspaper in Alabama. If you want to know how that happens, take a look at the Athens News Courier. Read the Owl's Eye, letters to the editor, announcements of upcoming events, and occasional hard news items. People who tune into local radio stations should hear our message. In Huntsville, two gentlemen are broadcasting a regular program for organized labor on a conservative radio station. You heard from one of them earlier today. Our youth and our tech-savvy adults should put our message on social media in a way that it is visible. Maintaining a broad, deep, and persistent effort at the local level is not just a strategy, it is a test. It is a test of whether democracy is important enough to enough of us to get the job done. News outlets report that Donald Trump drew 10,000 people to his crowd in his recent rally in Alabama. Could we attract half of that many people to a rally for our causes? A third or a fourth that many? We need hundreds of people to write letters to local papers on a regular basis advocating for our values. We need columns doing the same. We need skilled people with radio shows that reach in people's homes. We need local and state organizations to recruit candidates in every election, win or lose. We need to communicate our shared values and experiences, not just emphasize our differences. We need to reach people in their homes every day. Above all, we need to work together. There's only one job here. The League of Women Voters, the ACLU, the SPLC, labor unions, youth, political organizations, each have unique experience and special tasks, but all of them are seeking to bend the long arc of history toward justice. We also must admit openly what we all know privately. For the time being, and this is not always true, it has not always been true, and it won't continue to be true, but for the time being, the foes of democracy have congregated in the Republican Party and are using its resources and its historical position to oppose us. I am passing my values on to the younger members of my family. So are other moms, dads, grandmas, and grandpas. If we want those to be our values and our beliefs in a majority of homes in Alabama, we better get to work. Let's do something special. Let's become today's version of the greatest generation. Let's save democracy again. That would conclude my presentation, but I've been asked to keep another important part of voting rights in clear view here. Democracy is something like a living organism. All its parts have to work, and they all have to work together for it to be healthy. If any of its vital parts go missing, then democracy dies. One of those vital parts is law enforcement. My wife asked me recently what the speed limit was when we were driving. I knew the last sign said 60 miles an hour, but what I said to her is, whatever they pull you over for. That, you see, is reality. It is also reality that insurrection is illegal only if the law is enforced. Intimidation and terroristic threatening are illegal, but not if law enforcement stands by while scornful people intimidate and terrorize our local election officials, and not if prosecutors do not bring it to court, and not if juries fail to find its perpetrators guilty. Peaceful assembly is legal, but not if it incurs reactionary police violence. I and many of you have paid money, devoted time and effort, and invested ourselves emotionally into seeing new voting rights legislation passed through Congress and signed into law. When we finally pass it, we must not forget that the people who oppose it, the people who do not want the right to vote allotted equally to all people, will not suddenly accept its requirements. They will instead seek ways to violate its provisions. Passing voting rights legislation must include enforcing it, or it means nothing. Thank you for your introduction. I'm sorry. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm going to introduce, and you've been welcome. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Hanu Karlapalam. It's not actually an introduction. You've been watching him for a while now. But I'm going to call Hanu my friend. He surely is that, and my fellow evildoer. There's no keener and more thorough way to learn about how democracy works in our country than to be a political candidate. Perhaps you have not considered that there is no better way to reach the public in defense of democracy than through a political campaign. How do campaigns help protect democracy, and how can we help? Here is Hanu.
The technology. But thank you, Ken, for that nice introduction. Thank you for your participation and for supporting me throughout the process of organizing this event. I really applaud your energy and dedication. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
My name is Hanu Karlapalam, and I'm the organizer of this rally. I'm going to share my perspective as an Indian American immigrant, as the chairman of the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Caucus at the Alabama Democratic Party, as a member and the third vice president of the Limestone County branch of the NAACP, as a former candidate, as a former campaign chairman, and as an editorial board member of a local community newspaper here in Limestone County, Alabama. I ran twice for office and I lost. Each time I lost, I had friends and family sympathize with me, telling me what a great campaign I ran, how sorry they were, and how awful I must feel. I appreciate their kindness, but they have misdirected it. Let me explain. In our country, as in most others, people watch political campaigns like sporting events. Confining our understanding of a campaign to that one aspect, though, misses some important parts. My runs for mayor of Madison City and Limestone County Commissioner in Alabama started in private moments, shared only with family and close friends. My first considerations had nothing to do with winning or losing. Rather, they centered on why I should run, what problems existed, that being a candidate might solve? How would I help solve those problems if I were elected? Perhaps more importantly, how would my candidacy help solve those problems if I were not elected? My active involvement in my community already had revealed that elected officials were making decisions that worked against both the good and the will of many of their constituents. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a crisis. Democracy is under attack, and politicians are intentionally depriving people of their ability to vote. The organizations gathered here to address that problem are essential to repairing the damage already done and to prevent future damage. If you are not finding and supporting candidates for public office, you are missing an unparalleled opportunity. If you think the real measure of success in an election is limited to who wins or loses, then you are missing the point. Candidates that we run in Alabama may lose elections, but they never lose campaigns. They are the loudest public voice in our cause. They carry our message door to door, deliver it at rallies, print in newspapers, and shout it on airwaves. Money spent on them is never lost and never wasted. It is a bargain, and failing to support them is poor judgment. We will only win elections in Alabama if we continue to run candidates in Alabama. We have an important message to deliver. The US is becoming a more diverse nation. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing group in our country today. Yet, we are the most underrepresented group in politics. As an immigrant from India, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Many Americans tend to think that for everything there is a solution of violence. But I believe for everything there is a solution of non-violence. Non-violence is the most powerful weapon in the world. I am a proud democracy American citizen. I am a democracy warrior. I will not belie my oath by ignoring a real threat to the Constitution just because it comes from a domestic source. Funding a party that is infested with sympathizers and enablers of white nationalist terrorism and insurrectionists, voting for its candidates and condoning its actions is no longer a partisan choice, but collusion in an attack on democracy itself. Until and unless we hold those responsible for the domestic terrorist attack and the insurrection attempt on January 6th, our democracy will not live longer. Ask your local, state, and federal elected officials if they are on Team Democracy or Team Sedition. I will never forget January 6th. Never ever. The attack on the Capitol and the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan are similar attacks. The only difference is Taliban succeeded and the white supremacists did not on 1/6. We have to learn from the past failures of imagination and intelligence. Who would have thought that American democracy would be in such danger? but I predicted the threat a few years ago. In fact, the topic of my speech at the Women's March in Huntsville, Alabama was Protect Our Democracy. To restore our democracy fully, we need a free press, independent security and intelligence agencies, independent and non-political judiciary, transparency, net neutrality, political rights, civil rights, voting rights, and civil liberties. Together, we are not a minority. Together, we the people who value diversity and trust democracy are a majority. I request you, all of you, to run for office or find candidates who will. Serve on or be resources for campaign committees. Donate your time, talents, and money to that effort. We must elect pro-democracy candidates from cities, counties, to state to federal level in 2022 and for the next 20 years and beyond. Thank you again for being here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Thank you everyone for participating and for the years you have spent serving your communities. March on. I didn't plan to be the last speaker of this event, but we have a wonderful panel coming up. So now let me throw it back to Ken. At this time, we will have another 20-minute panel discussion. Again, please raise your hand by hovering your mouse on the right side of our screen. Click the hand symbol, and you will be put in the queue. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back our moderator for the panel discussions, Ken Hines. Ken, sorry, you are muted.
Ken, you need to unmute.
See, our little safety protocols sometimes get us in trouble. I was saying, let me introduce again the panel members who previously were speakers. Kathleen Leonard, League of Women Voters. We're going to add a person who has not been a speaker, Chris England, the Alabama State House and chairman of the Alabama Democratic Party. I'm going to be speaking. Austin Weiss, who gave a wonderful speech, the co-founder Youth Activist Coalition and a junior at James Clemens High School in Madison, Alabama. Welcome to our panel, and welcome here, Mr. England. Good to see you. Let's begin by saying this, by doing this. Each year, the electorate changes. Each year, there are people who move out of state or die. Each year, there are wonderful young people who come of age and begin voting. So the process of finding voters and encouraging voters, getting people to register to vote is a never-ending process. I know that we've gone through a big problem lately because of COVID, and that has affected all of us. It affected the way we ran elections, the way we recruit voters, and everything else. But I'm going to ask Kathleen, compared to what we need to do to register voters, how are we doing?
Okay, I got myself off mute. Well, with COVID, I actually think we did okay because we were able to pivot and find ways of getting to people in non-traditional ways and in ways that were safe. Everybody loved the drive-ups. I think we'll do more drive-ups even without COVID. People really liked absentee voting, and so I think we're going to need to continue to push for no excuse absentee voting in order to allow people to have access to the polls when they work non-traditional 9 to 5 hours. They need to be able to vote. We actually in Alabama have a pretty good online voter registration. So if you've got a driver's license and or know your social security number, you can get in there and you can do online voter registration. So there are ways of getting around the face-to-face, but things that you do get from that face-to-face is you do get the opportunity to actually reach out and touch someone. I know that I have a 17-year-old nephew, and we talked about voting last year. He was very afraid of making a mistake. And so when you're doing that face-to-face thing, not doing just sending out a link and saying, hey, register, you get to have that opportunity to talk to somebody about what their concerns are and alleviate their concerns and make them really feel like their vote counts, because in a lot of cases we get the question, my vote doesn't count. And so why should I bother? And when there are lots of barriers and you feel like your vote doesn't count, then they don't want to take the first step, which is registering. So that is some of the things that we've seen.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me redirect just a second. Does someone have a comment? Let me redirect just a second to Austin. Austin, you are, for us 75-year-olds, you are about this far from being ready to vote. And you are in with the high school people. You're with them every day. All of those people are going to become our voters very, very soon. What are you seeing on campus? Is registration to vote common there? Are people interested in voting? What's going on in our high schools?
Well, I think that there are a good number of people who are interested in voting, interested in getting involved with advocacy and politics, but there's a large disconnect. I do think there's a larger population of people who aren't interested versus those who are, just because of numerous reasons, like they don't think that their vote's going to count. It's not going to make a difference in the outcome of the election. And just listening to what Mrs. Kathleen said, it made me think of a quote from one of my favorite authors, Carol Anderson, Emory University professor, that says, voter suppression is designed to demoralize the electorate, to make people think that it doesn't matter, that the system is rigged, your vote doesn't count, and that is a false narrative. I think that that's one of the biggest issues, just what we're seeing in high schools, is that people, I know a lot of people who just did not vote in the 2020 election because they didn't think that just living in Alabama, that their vote would make a substantial difference. But I definitely think there's a lot of work that needs to be done just with maybe providing voter registration and government classes, things such as that could increase voter participation and interest.
Thank you.
Ken?
Yes.
I do want to say something to Austin.
You go right ahead.
You have impressed me greatly, and you give me hope. I really appreciate what you've had to say, and I think your quote was spot on. So thank you for continuing the fight, and you do give me hope for the future.
Thank you.
And that deserves a big amen. Representative England, some of this could be good news for you, but some of it could be bad news for you. What would you say to try to persuade people who don't think votes count? How does that affect us in Alabama?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm trying to get used to this format. I probably used 150,000 video conferencing format tabs, so this was a new one for me. So when I talk to people and they tell me that their vote doesn't count, but then they complain about their communities. They complain about lack of representation on boards. They complain about their criminal justice system and how unfair it is, or they complain about the taxes they pay, or lack of health care, or lack of resources around them. And I tell them, that's what voting is all about. For example, if you, as someone who's doesn't like the way the criminal justice system operates, if you don't register to vote, guess what? You don't serve on juries. So you don't put yourself at you don't give yourself a seat at the table to actually be involved. Also, you don't like you got situations where you don't like the representation you have. Well, you're not doing the bare minimum to have an impact on that representation at all. So what I do is I try to connect the bare basic necessities and directly correlate that to the person and their vote. And, if you've got the energy to complain, if you got the energy to find somebody and get on them about something that you don't like, you're actually putting in more effort to complain than it would just to get registered and vote and participate. So one thing I always say is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And if you're not voting, you're on the menu.
Thank you. And words well spoken. And I'm going to add one brief comment myself, and that is, in other roles, I've been involved in a number of political campaigns. It is encouraging to see that people are willing to be candidates and are willing to go out there and work and get the word out and try to do the job that's supposed to be done in an American democracy. Sometimes it is a little discouraging to know that as Representative England said, there are people who are more interested in campaigning than participating. But if all of us continue to support candidates who support democracy, if all of us continue to support candidates who are getting the word out, elected or not elected, getting the word out during their campaigns to thousands of people across the state or to hundreds of people across their town, we're going to make progress. We just can't stop. That's all. Okay, with that, let's open this up to the audience. See if anyone has any questions or comments. Again, anyone who wants to comment can move their cursor to the right part of their screen and click on the red hand symbol. If you do that, I'll see that here and I will call on you. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask this. I'm going to ask if any members of the panel have any final words regarding what we've covered today, what we've covered in this, especially this last half of the session. And if not, then I'm going to say one more thing. Did you, Austin? Did you have a? Okay, yes. I'm going to say one more thing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. What I was just going to say is that, especially when it comes to voter suppression and voting rights, I think that it's just important for us all to pay attention to what's going on around us. Attend your local council meetings. A lot of people don't do that, but it can be very imperative just to know what's going on. And one thing that I've noticed throughout working with a number of organizations is a lot of people don't know what's on their ballot. So before you go to the ballot box, make sure you know what's on your ballot. Those ballot measures can have extremely significant impacts on policy and the local state level. So just make sure that you're aware and cognizant of what is actually on the ballot.
Yes, and it's incumbent upon all of us, the groups here and the people who have been active in this process, to try to get the word out about those things, because some people don't even know that they're supposed to be looking. That's an important part of what our job is. I think the most important thing that has happened today, in addition to the wonderful analyses and the ideas that have come from the speakers and the panels, is that a group of people who are responsible for a lot of activity in the state of Alabama, ensuring that people have the right to vote, ensuring that our democracy is protected, are here together, expressing their ideas together, and sharing with the public. Voting is not an option in a democracy. In a democracy, you can not vote if you want, but as more and more people decide not to vote, it no longer is a democracy. Democracy is supposed to be controlled by a majority of the people, expressing their will within the constitutional confines that we have. I'm going to read this, please. This concludes the final panel discussion and this event. It does not, of course, conclude our responsibility to defend the voting rights of our citizens or our opportunity to share that task with one another. Thank you for your participation, and march on.